Hey guys, tonight we are diving into feudal Japan, stepping into the chaotic Sengoku period around 1500, where you will trade your cozy bed for a rice paddy and discover that a day in this world is less about samurai heroics and more about mud, sweat, and survival. So hit like, subscribe, and drop your city in the comments to tell us where you're drifting off from. You blink, and the modern world vanishes, replaced by a humid haze that slaps you with the scent of wet earth, manure, and smoke. Your sneakers sinking into a muddy path as you stumble into a Japanese village, its thatched roofs sagging under the weight of recent rain, bamboo fences leaning like tired sentinels, and peasants in straw hats staring at you as if you've just dropped from the sky, which, technically, you have. You expected a serene landscape of cherry blossoms and stoic samurai, like some polished anime scene. But this is a gritty, bustling mess. Dogs barking, ox carts creaking, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer mixing with shouts from a rice field where bent backs toil under a grey sky. The air thick with the buzz of flies, and the weight of a world where survival hinges on the next harvest. You stand frozen, your modern jacket glaringly out of place as a farmer in a patched kimono squints at you, his hands caked with clay, muttering in a dialect you can't pass his suspicion as sharp as the sickle at his belt. You take a step, mud sucking at your shoes, and realize you're in the Sengoku period, a time of warring clans where villages like this were pawns in a deadly game, not the peaceful havens of your imagination. A well-known historical fact anchors you. During the Sengoku period, 1467 to 1603, Japan was fractured into domains ruled by daimyo warlords, with peasants caught between laboring for rice and dodging raids from rival clans, their lives tied to the land in a rigid feudal hierarchy. You dodge a cart piled with rice stalks, its driver cursing as the ox slips, and smirk. Time travel tip number 1. Pack boots, because feudal Japan's welcome mat is pure mud. A quirky detail catches your eye. A small straw doll tied to a fence post, meant to ward off evil spirits, its lopsided grin mocking your disorientation as if it knows you're out of your depth. You wonder, how did villagers find hope in such turbulent times, clinging to charms while war loomed? Historians debate whether these spiritual rituals strengthened community bonds or distracted from survival's demands, with some records showing festivals that united villages despite constant threats. The viral context is stark. This village is not just a backdrop, but a living machine of toil, where every step you take is a lesson in resilience, the mud a metaphor for the era's unrelenting grind. You imagine applying this to your survival, picturing yourself blending in, your strange accent and clean teeth a liability as you try to mimic the farmer's stoop, hoping to avoid questions you can't answer. Framing this for your journey, the village sets the stage for a day in feudal Japan, where beauty hides hardship, and your outsider status is a ticking clock. If you're struggling to picture this chaos, grab my free guide below on surviving feudal Japan. It's packed with tips to navigate this world. A dry joke lands as you wipe mud from your face. Congratulations, you've landed in history's messiest Airbnb with 0 stars for cleanliness. The farmer gestures you toward the fields, his calloused hand pointing to a hoe, and you realize you're expected to work, the weight of the tool heavy in your hands, pulling you into the back-breaking rhythm of a peasant. It's life where labor is your first test in this unforgiving land. As you clutch the hoe thrust into your hands by the gruff farmer, the village, smuddy chaos still clinging to your sneakers, and the sting of curious stares burning your back, you're drawn deeper into the rice fields, their flooded paddies glinting under a humid sun, where the relentless labor of feudal Japan's peasants unfolds, making you wish you could swap this time travel ordeal for a desk job and an air-conditioned office. The air is thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying straw, the buzz of insects a constant drone as you wade into the ankle-deep water, your jeans soaking instantly, the cold muck sucking at your feet like a living thing. Each step a reminder that this is no serene Zen garden, but a back-breaking grind where survival hinges on every grain of rice. You expected the work to be tough but picturesque, like a samurai movie's lush backdrop, but this is a slog. Your hoe sinks into the clay, each swing jarring your arms, the sun baking your neck, as sweat stings your eyes, and the farmer's sharp commands in a guttural dialect cut through the haze, urging you to keep pace with the others, their bent backs moving in a rhythm you can't match. The field stretches endlessly, a patchwork of paddies, bordered by bamboo stakes, where men and women toil in silence, their straw hats bobbing like buoys, their hands calloused from years of this labor, their faces etched with resignation you're starting to feel. A well-known historical fact grounds you. In feudal Japan's Sengoku period, rice was the currency of power, with peasants producing it under the daimyo's strict oversight, their harvests taxed heavily to fund wars and castles, leaving just enough to stave off starvation. You slip, nearly falling face first into the muck, and smirk. Time travel tip number 2. Pack ibuprofen, because feudal Japan's cardio is a one-way ticket to a chiropractor. A quirky detail catches your eye. A small wooden marker carved with a prayer to Inari, the rice god stuck in the field's edge. Its faded paint, a plea for a good harvest believed to coax divine favor, despite the ever-present threat of drought or raid. You wonder, how did peasants endure this endless toil knowing their rice-fueled wars they'd never see? Historians debate whether this labor fostered resilience or quiet rebellion, with some records showing farmers hiding grain to evade taxes. The viral context is stark. These fields are not just farmland, but the backbone of feudal power, where every swing of your hoe ties you to a system that grinds down bodies to lift up lords, a truth that hits harder as your arms ache. You imagine applying this to your survival, picturing yourself mastering the hoe's rhythm to avoid the farmer's glare, your modern strength fading against the stamina of those born to this life, your sneakers a soggy liability. Framing this for your journey, the rice fields reveal the Sengoku period's brutal foundation, where beauty masks exploitation, and your role as a laborer is a humbling step in this unforgiving day. If you're struggling to grasp this grind, grab my free guide below on feudal Japan survival. It's packed with tips to outlast the fields. A dry joke lands as you wipe sweat from your brow. Congratulations, you survived the village's welcome, but now you're in a medieval gym where the workout is free, but the pain is mandatory. The farmer barks again, pointing to a missed patch, and you redouble your efforts. The hoes wait a lesson in endurance, the water is chill, numbing your legs as you work alongside a woman who hums a faint tune, her voice a small defiance against the labor's monotony. You notice her fingers, nimble despite the calluses, tying a bundle of rice stalks with practiced ease, and you try to mimic her, earning a nod that feels like a rare victory. The sun climbs higher, the heat oppressive, and you hear distant shouts. A samurai patrol passing nearby, their armor glinting, a reminder of the daimyo's watchful eye, their presence both protection and threat. You pause to catch your breath, the field's edge offering a moment's rest, but a child runs up, offering a cup of tepid water, his eyes curious about your strange clothes, his smile a fleeting warmth in this grueling day. You drink, the water earthy but welcome, and notice the prayer marker again, its wood worn by seasons of hope, sparking thoughts of the village's faith in gods over lords. The debate lingers. Did devotion to deities like Inari sustain them, or was it a distraction from their exploited lives? You push on, the hoe's rhythm becoming muscle memory, your back screaming as the day stretches, the paddy's water reflecting a sky that promises no relief. The viral rehook teases, this labor is brutal, but wait until you step into the samurai's shadow where danger wears a sharper edge. A light joke bubbles up, note to self. Next time travel, bring a tractor because this rice field is the ultimate leg day. The patrol's clatter grows louder, their horses churning the path, and you sense a shift, the village tensing, as their presence signals a new test pulling you toward the next chapter, where the samurai's world awaits with its own rules and perils. As you drag your aching body from the rice fields, the hoe-ass weight still throbbing in your arms, and the muddy water soaking your sneakers to a squelching ruin, you catch the clatter of hooves and the glint of lacquered armor as a samurai patrol sweeps into the village, their stern gazes casting a shadow far heavier than the clouds overhead, pulling you into a tense encounter with feudal Japan's warrior elite that shatters any romantic notions of noble swordsmen, making you wish you could swap this time travel saga for a quiet library and a samurai movie marathon. The air shifts, carrying the sharp scent of horse sweat and oiled leather, mingling with the village's familiar mud and straw as you stand frozen on the path, your modern jacket, a glaring oddity amidst the peasants who bow low, their heads nearly touching the ground. Their silence a stark contrast to the field's hum of labor. You expected samurai to be heroic figures, all honor and grace, like in a Kurosawa film, but these men are intimidating. Their katanas glinting at their sides, faces hard under conical helmets. Their presence a reminder that power here is enforced with steel, not chivalry. You mimic the bow, your knees creaking from the day's toil, but your awkward stance draws a sharp glance from the lead samurai. His eyes narrowing as if you're a puzzle. He's tempted to slice open, his hand resting on his sword's hilt with a casual menace that makes your heart race. The village square, once alive with the bustle of work, now stills the only sounds, the creak of armor and the snorting of horses, their hooves churning the mud you've come to loathe, and you realize you were caught in a world where a wrong move could mean a blade-up's swift judgment. A well-known historical fact grounds you. During the Sengoku period, samurai were the military elite serving daimyo lords and enforcing order through strict codes like Bushido, but their loyalty often came with a brutal edge, taxing villages or punishing disobedience with death. You notice a peasant slip a sack of rice to a samurai's attendant, his hands trembling, and you smirk. Time travel tip number 3. Pack a low profile, because catching a samurai's eye is about as safe as juggling torches in a straw barn. A quirky detail catches your attention. A small charm, a folded paper omamori tied to the samurai's saddle, believed to bring battle luck, its bright red cord swaying like a taunt against the grim reality of their violence. You wonder, how did villagers balance fear and respect for these warriors, knowing they could protect or destroy with equal ease? Historians still debate whether samurai upheld order or sowed terror, with some records showing peasants hiding goods to avoid their demands, while others depict them as revered guardians. The viral context is clear. These samurai are not just protectors, but enforcers of a feudal system. Their presence a blade hovering over the village, where every interaction is a test of survival, and clean teeth a risk as you try to blend into the crowd, your every move calculated to avoid their scrutiny. Framing this for your journey, the samurai's shadow reveals the Sengoku period's precarious balance of power, where honor is a mask for control, and your outsider status is a constant danger in this tightly wound world. If you're struggling to navigate this warrior's gaze, grab my free guide below on surviving feudal Japan. It is packed with tips to dodge the wrong kind of attention. A dry joke lands as you stifle a nervous yawn. Congratulations, you survived the rice fields. But now you're in a samurai showdown where the only script is bow or bleed. The patrol moves toward the village headman's hut, their armor clanking like a warning bell, and you follow at a distance, the crowd parting like water around a stone, their whispers hushed about a recent raid by a rival clan. The samurai's presence both a shield and a chain. You notice a young boy, barely 10, watching the warriors with wide-eyed awe, clutching a wooden sword. His dreams of Bushido a stark contrast to the fear etched in his mother's face as she pulls him back. You try to fade into the background, leaning against a bamboo fence. But a samurai's attendant barks at you to move, mistaking you for a loiterer, and you shuffle away. Heart pounding the mud, sucking at your shoes, as you head toward the headman's hut, where taxes and disputes are settled with the same steel-edged authority. The quirky omamori charm appears again, tucked into a peasant's belt, a desperate mimicry of the samurai's talisman, as if it could protect against their wrath. The debate lingers. Did samurai inspire loyalty through protection or resentment through oppression? You feel the village's tension, the air heavy with unspoken fears, as the patrol demands rice and labor reports, the headman bowing repeatedly, his voice strained as he promises more than the village can spare. You slip behind a cart, your breath shallow, the samurai's gaze sweeping the crowd, and you wonder how anyone lived under such constant watch, their lives a balance of deference and defiance. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows that blend with the warriors' silhouettes, and you hear a shout. A dispute over taxes escalates, pulling you toward the next chapter where the headman's negotiations reveal the crushing weight of feudal obligations. You follow the samurai patrol at a cautious distance, your soaked sneakers squelching in the mud, your arms still aching from the rice field, and you arrive at the village headman's hut. a low wooden structure with a thatched roof that seems ready to collapse under the weight of centuries of toil. The villagers cluster nearby, eyes downcast, their murmurs blending with the distant clatter of the samurai AS armor and the occasional creak of bamboo, creating a tense symphony of fear and resignation. You expected diplomacy to be polite and orderly, like a council in a modern boardroom. But this is a negotiation with stakes measured in rice, sweat, and potential death. The headman, a wiry man with a lined face and a bowed back from years of managing both his peasants and the daimyo's taxes, steps forward, his hands trembling as he presents the village's accounts. You notice the careful folding of each rice ledger, each tally etched in ink that has faded from seasons of sun and rain. The numbers representing lives and labor more than currency. A well-known historical fact anchors you. In Sengoku, Japan, villages were obligated to supply rice to their daimyo, often leaving barely enough to feed the farmers themselves, and the headman's position was perilous. Too much tax collected could invite revolt, too little could invite punishment or execution. You lean against the fence, trying not to breathe too loudly, and your eyes are drawn to a small, intricately carved netsuke dangling from the headman's sash, a miniature fox believed to protect him from misfortune. It strikes you, every object here, no matter how mundane, carries layers of meaning, superstition, and survival strategy. Time travel tip number 4. Never underestimate the small charms. In feudal Japan, even tiny talismans could make the difference between life and death, or at least between stress and slightly less stress. The samurai captain steps forward, his lacquered armor gleaming in the muted sunlight, and demands the village's tax contribution. The headman bows low, voice quivering as he begins listing quantities of rice, soy, and other produce, each word a careful negotiation to avoid angering the warriors while keeping the villagers alive. You flinch as a samurai attendant jabs a gauntleted finger toward an undercounted sack, the sound of the gesture echoing like a pistol shot in the tense silence. You realize this isn't just about rice, it's about power, fear, and the delicate balance that keeps villages from being raised in a single morning. A quirky detail catches your attention. A small cat weaving between villagers' ankles, seemingly indifferent to the samurai's presence, its tail flicking like a metronome for the tension, a reminder that life, in all its persistence, continues even under the shadow of war. You wonder, did villagers find solace in such small distractions, or were they simply too exhausted to care? Historians debate whether animals like cats and dogs were practical companions, pest controllers, or small comforts in a harsh world. But either way, you note that their presence humanizes a scene otherwise dominated by fear. Imagine balancing a budget where failure could lead to your death, every misstep magnified by the presence of lethal enforcers, and every glance from a samurai a reminder that your authority is conditional and violent. You can help, but contrast it with modern office politics. The stakes in feudal Japan are measured in flesh and livelihood, not quarterly profits. A dry joke bubbles up. You thought performance reviews were stressful. Try surviving a tax audit wielded by men who carry swords longer than your torso. The captain's voice cuts through your thoughts, booming in a dialect thick with menace as he scrutinizes the headman's figures. Sweat beads on your forehead, not just from the day's labor, but from witnessing this high-stakes ritual where a slip could invite immediate reprisal. You notice another quirky detail, a small wooden tablet hanging behind the headman, inscribed with a protective prayer to Hachiman, the god of war, intended to shield him from mistakes that could be fatal. You wonder, were these charms a genuine source of comfort, or a psychological crutch in a world where one wrong move meant death? The viral context is clear. This is not a staged historical reenactment. It's a living exercise in fear management, resource distribution, and human endurance. And you, the outsider, are navigating it with all the grace of a cat trying to walk across a frozen lake. You imagine applying this to your survival, keeping low, nodding often, and avoiding eye contact, every motion deliberate to signal subservience and awareness of the invisible rules that govern life here. Framing this for your journey, the headman's hut becomes a microcosm of Sengoku society, a place where labor, loyalty, superstition, and fear intersect, and your presence as a modern interloper is a constant liability. You're learning fast that knowledge alone won't protect you. Observation, patience, and the ability to mimic local behavior are essential. If you're struggling to process this tension, grab my free guide below on surviving feudal Japan. It is packed with tips to navigate authority without getting cut in half. A dry joke escapes your lips as you shift in the mud. Congratulations, you've officially witnessed the ultimate bureaucratic nightmare medieval style, where spreadsheets are wooden ledgers and your boss carries a sword. The headman's negotiation stretches on, the samurai occasionally nodding, occasionally glaring, and you catch the rhythm of survival here. Careful word choice, vigilant attention, and a constant awareness of who holds the blade. As the negotiation concludes, with the village barely scraping together enough tribute to satisfy the samurai, the captain signals his men to depart. The villagers release a collective sigh, some collapsing onto the mud in relief, others exchanging glances that mix fear, fatigue, and quiet triumph. You step back, taking in the scene, realizing the true weight of feudal obligations. Survival is a dance along a razor's edge, and one misstep could unravel everything. A quirky detail lingers in your mind. A small pile of leftover rice grains hidden behind the hut, likely set aside by the headman to feed families after the tribute is taken. A subtle act of defiance or pragmatic care history, whispering through tiny, tangible actions. You wonder, how many lives depended on such careful hiding? How many rebellions were quietly seeded in moments like this? Historians debate these subtle resistances, noting that while large-scale uprisings were rare, local cunning often allowed peasants to retain scraps of autonomy. The viral rehook hits. Surviving feudal Japan isn't about grand heroics. It's about noticing the smallest details, reading between the lines, and keeping your head and your limbs intact. A light joke escapes. You thought budgeting was tough. Try rationing survival in a village where one miscounted sack of rice could spell doom. As the sun dips lower, painting the thatched roofs in orange and gold, you step away from the headman's hut, feeling the lingering tension of authority and obligation pressing on your shoulders. Your sneakers squish in the mud, your arms ache from the field, your mind races with the day's lessons, and you realize that feudal Japan's hierarchy isn't just a social structure. It is an endurance test, a psychological gauntlet, and a lesson in humility rolled into one. The next chapter beckons. Night falls, and with it comes the darkness of the village streets, lanterns flickering as the villagers retreat, leaving you to confront what life is like after the day's labor and the samurai's scrutiny, where hunger, superstition, and danger linger like shadows. You glance toward a flickering lantern at the edge of the village. The next section promises the intimate terrors of a Sengoku night, and the survival lessons are about to get even more personal. The sun dips below the horizon, painting the village in a wash of orange and gray. The muddy paths now shadows under the faint flicker of lanterns as you realize that surviving feudal Japan doesn't end when the labor stops, and the night brings its own rules, dangers, and eerie routines. The villagers retreating to their cramped, thatched homes, the scent of wet straw and smoke curling through the air, while you shuffle along, trying to keep your modern jacket from sticking to the mud-caked walls, and notice the subtle, nervous glances exchanged between peasants, whispers of raid and bandit, slipping like ghosts into the darkness. A reminder that the Sengoku period wasn't just defined by samurai patrols, but by constant threats from rival clans and rogue warriors, with well-known historical facts confirming that villages often fortified themselves with wooden barricades, watchposts, and hidden alarms, the men sometimes sleeping with weapons nearby, while women and children huddled in fear, a tense choreography of survival repeated night after night. And you, the outsider, try to mimic their behavior, crouching behind a low fence as a group of villagers murmurs prayers to Inari and Hachiman, offering rice cakes and sake at small altars to placate gods they hope will shield them from violence. And a quirky detail catches your eye. A line of tiny straw dolls tied to fence posts, their lopsided faces grinning at the moonlight, wards against misfortune, perhaps more psychological than magical. But in a world where one misstep could mean death, every charm is a potential lifeline. And time travel tip number 5 hits you. Pack a headlamp or at least a good flashlight, because Modern eyes are not made for moonless nights in feudal Japan, where every shadow can hide a threat, and you feel the chill in your bones as a distant howl of wolves, or perhaps raiders, echoes across the rice paddies, making your heart race while you notice a child barely 10, clutching a wooden sword and peeking from the doorway, a small beacon of hope and imitation of the samurai they will never truly become. And you can't help but think about how these children grow up fast, learning fear, obedience, and resilience as survival skills, with historians debating whether the constant tension built a hardy generation or crushed them under relentless stress. The viral context sharpening. Night in Sengoku, Japan, is a test of nerves, stealth, and observation, where the smallest sound or misstep could summon disaster, and you imagine applying this to your survival, hugging walls, keeping your movements silent, mimicking local posture and habits, your modern presence screaming outsider with every squeak of your wet sneakers. And you notice a faintly glowing fire in a communal area where villagers share small meals, the smoke curling into the night, giving warmth but also scenting your position to anyone watching, your stomach growling in empathy with their hard lives, and a dry joke escapes your lips. You thought camping trips were tough. Try sleeping in mud-splattered clothes with the threat of samurai or bandits at your door, because here, your comfort is irrelevant, your alertness mandatory, and the villagers' prayers and charms seem to hum with a quiet tension. The omamori tied to walls and doorways swaying with the breeze as if alive, and you wonder, does faith sustain them or merely distract from the brutality of their lives, while the debate lingers in your mind, and suddenly a distant shout, perhaps a wolf, perhaps a bandit, cuts through the night, the villagers stiffening, and you hold your breath, the darkness closing in, your body aching from the day's labor, yet your mind hyper-aware. Because in feudal Japan, nightfall is not rest. It's reconnaissance, caution, and endurance. And as you crouch beside a small lantern, the shadows of thatched huts stretching long and threatening across the mud, you realize that surviving this night is just as grueling as the fields, just as punishing as the samurai's gaze, and the next chapter promises the true test of courage and cunning as you step into the morning with knowledge that every day in this era is a fight, every night a gauntlet, and your outsider status is a constant threat, teasing the viral hook. If you think you could handle this, wait until you see how the village deals with internal conflict, rival clans, and the ever-present danger that lurks in every corner of feudal Japan. The first light of dawn barely touches the mud-caked roofs when the village is jolted awake by the distant but unmistakable clatter of hooves and the low, guttural shouts of men armed with sword spears and banners that mark them as a rival clan, and your stomach twists as you realize that surviving feudal Japan isn't just about rice fields, taxes, or intimidating samurai patrols. It's about unpredictability, violence, and the ever-present threat that life could be snuffed out in a single raid, and you crouch behind a fence, your sneakers sinking further into the mud as you strain to hear every step. Your arms still sore from yesterday's toil, and you notice the villagers scrambling, men grabbing what weapons they can find, women shepherding children into the huts, and the entire settlement vibrating with a mixture of fear, adrenaline, and practiced panic. A scene made all the more vivid by well-known historical facts. During the Sengoku period, rival clans frequently raided villages for resources, slaves, or to send a message, and these skirmishes could erupt without warning, leaving destruction and terror in their wake. And a quirky detail catches your eye. A small wooden bell tied to a bamboo pole that a villager shakes rhythmically, signaling the alarm, its sound cutting through the haze of morning mist like a warning trumpet, an improvisation that reflects the villagers' knowledge of warfare despite their peasant status. And you can't help but marvel at their quick adaptation, while time travel tip number 6 slaps you upside the head. Always know your exits, because in feudal Japan, hiding behind a fence might save your life by seconds, but it won't protect you from a spear thrust. And the attackers' banners glint under the rising sun, their symbols unfamiliar yet chilling, as you note the expressions on the villagers' faces, etched with both terror and grim determination. The children's eyes wide with a mixture of awe and panic, clutching wooden swords or dolls as if they could protect them, and the air smells of smoke dust and wet earth. A cocktail that makes your stomach churn, while your mind races to process survival strategies, and you observe a farmer hefting a heavy hoe not to cultivate rice, but to defend his home. A detail both heroic and tragic, highlighting the blurred line between labor and warfare in this era. While the attackers descend on the first house, yanking open doors and demanding rice and valuables, the shouts and clang of metal filling the muddy streets. And you realize that the villagers' previous morning of toil has done nothing to prepare them for this chaos. Yet their improvisation, hiding supplies, and clever barricades speak to centuries of learned survival. And your modern logic fails to grasp the immediacy of life or death negotiation in a world where swords speak louder than words. Your thoughts racing. Time travel tip number 7. Never underestimate the human instinct for preservation, because even peasants know how to vanish like shadows or strike when least expected. And as you crouch beside a hut, you notice a young boy signaling with a small flag to a neighbor across the alley, an improvised system of communication that underscores the village's ingenuity under pressure, while historians debate whether such resistance was widespread or sporadic. The viral context sharpening. The drama unfolding isn't cinematic embellishment, it's raw, tactical survival, and every decision made here, every step and shout, carries immediate consequence, your heart pounding with each muffled scream or clash of steel. A dry joke forming in your mind. You thought dodgeball was dangerous. Try dodging spears and shouting raiders in mud-soaked shoes. And as you scan the chaos, a woman drags a child into a hidden alcove, their small hands clutching charms and amulets, reflecting the blend of superstition and desperate hope that permeates daily life, while a small ox, spooked by the raiders, runs loose through the village, knocking over barrels and adding to the chaos. And you realize that survival in feudal Japan requires not only awareness of human threats, but of the unpredictable environment. And as the attack escalates, you witness a peasant swing a club with desperate precision to fend off a raider, their raw strength and courage both horrifying and inspiring. A reminder that life here is not abstract history, but a continuous negotiation with violence, hunger, and fear. And your mind churns with scenarios of escape, hiding, and subtle mimicry. Your modern knowledge a fragile shield in a world where centuries of brutal reality define every heartbeat. While the attackers loot, burn, and scream the village's chaos, a harsh lesson in Sengoku-era survival. And as you duck behind a cart, your eyes catch a peculiar detail, a small omamori dangling from a post untouched by fire or blood, as if the gods themselves have a sense of dark humor. And you wonder, does faith truly protect, or is it just another layer in the psychological armor these people must wear to survive constant danger? And finally, as the sun climbs higher, scattering the raiders with approaching reinforcements from the local samurai, the village begins the grim assessment of losses. The survivors' faces pale with relief and exhaustion, and you realize that a day in feudal Japan isn't measured in hours, but in the intensity of threats survived, the agility of mind and body, and the quiet cunning that allows ordinary people to endure extraordinary peril, the viral hook landing. If you think you could survive this world, remember, as the dust settles from the rival clan raid, the village lies in a mixture of eerie quiet and scattered chaos. Smoke curling lazily from smoldering huts, the scent of burnt straw, trampled mud, and fear heavy in the air, and you step carefully through the debris, your wet sneakers sinking in puddles of mud and broken rice stalks. Noticing the villagers moving with a tense precision, some gathering what remains of their possessions, others inspecting the partially destroyed fences and gates. Their expressions a mix of relief, exhaustion, and simmering anger, while the local headman directs small groups to salvage supplies and tend to minor injuries. His earlier bowing and pleading now replaced by an authoritative energy born of necessity. And well-known historical facts remind you that Sengoku villages were often forced to improvise defenses, from sharpening stakes to digging temporary ditches, because constant raids were a grim fact of life. And you watch a group of men driving stakes into the ground around the perimeter of the paddies, their faces streaked with mud and sweat, the rhythm of labor echoing the same endurance required in the rice fields just hours before. And a quirky detail draws your attention. A young girl tying small straw dolls to the stakes, each a charm against misfortune, her hands moving with calm purpose despite the chaos surrounding her. A reminder that superstition and survival are intertwined in ways your modern mind struggles to fully comprehend. And time travel tip number 8. smacks you square in the reality of the era. Always observe and learn local defensive strategies, because improvisation often outweighs brute strength. And you notice a woman carrying buckets of water, dousing the small fires still flickering among the huts, while murmured prayers to Inari and Hachiman rise into the morning air. The villagers' faith offering both comfort and psychological resilience, and your mind reels at how these ordinary people, already exhausted from labor and previous threats, find the energy to respond methodically to disaster, their knowledge of the land, the structures, and each other forming a makeshift military intelligence network, a viral-worthy insight. The organization of a village under duress is both spontaneous and learned, a testament to human adaptability. And you imagine applying this to your survival, crouching low, mimicking local movements, carrying supplies cautiously, noting exit routes, and avoiding drawing attention. Your modern jacket a glaring anomaly, but also a tool for concealment if used wisely. And a dry joke bubbles up. You thought office fire drills were stressful. Try coordinating a village recovery while dodging the possibility of another raid, all while keeping children and livestock alive, and as the villagers continue working. You notice a small group setting up a watch post on a slight rise at the edge of the rice paddies. Their makeshift platform constructed from mud bamboo and scavenged planks. A clear indication that vigilance is never optional, and a quirky detail strikes you. A cat perched on the edge, its eyes scanning the horizon, seemingly co-opted into the village's early warning system. A silent, almost absurdly cute addition to the grim tableau. And historians debate how much these improvised defenses actually deterred raiders versus simply providing psychological reassurance. But in any case, the effort reveals the resilience and cunning required to survive in the Sengoku period. Your heart racing as you realize that observation alone can teach lessons in strategy, patience, and timing that your modern schooling never could. While a child passes you a small cup of water, their wide eyes reflecting a mixture of hope and fatigue, and you sip it gratefully. The muddy liquid strangely refreshing, a moment of human connection amid chaos. The viral context crystal clear. Survival in feudal Japan is about adaptation, improvisation, and reading people and situations faster than anyone else. And you picture yourself helping rebuild a fence, hoisting a bucket, or silently signaling a hidden threat. Your muscles screaming but your mind sharpening, absorbing every nuance while a small fire crackles nearby, casting shadows that dance across the villagers' faces, highlighting fatigue, relief, and determination all at once. And you wonder how many generations endured similar trials. Their strategies passed down orally and through observation, forming a subtle social network of survival knowledge and time travel tip number 9 hits. You can learn more about adapting from watching than from reading, because here actions speak louder than words. And as the sun climbs higher, warming your wet clothes and mud-caked sneakers, you begin to see the village slowly regain order, the survivors' movements precise yet weary. And you realize that feudal Japan's survival lessons extend beyond the battlefield, the rice fields. The taxes, the raids, the night's vigil, all contribute to a daily education in endurance, ingenuity, and human psychology. The dry humor pressing itself to the surface. You thought gym boot camp was tough? Try coordinating a post-raid recovery without losing a limb or your lunch. And as the day stretches on, the villagers continue their work, fortified by experience, faith, and necessity. The next chapter beckoning you to witness how external pressures from daimyo demands and internal tensions between families create a web of conflict and survival that challenges even the hardiest time traveler, teasing the next viral hook. If you think rebuilding fences is hard, wait until you see what happens when politics, power, and loyalty collide in Sengoku Japan. As the village slowly recovers from the rival clan raid, the shadow of authority reasserts itself in the form of daimyo demands. The headman receiving word that the regional lord expects a full accounting of the rice, labor contributions, and any fines owed. And you watch with a mixture of awe and dread as the villagers, already exhausted from work, night vigils, and the morning's chaos, gather to comply with these expectations. Their faces a mixture of resignation, fear, and strategic calculation. Because well-known historical facts remind you that during the Sengoku period, daimyo ruled their territories with near-absolute power, expecting strict compliance from village heads who bore the burden of translating these demands into action without tipping into rebellion or disaster. And your modern mind reels as you try to imagine a world where bureaucracy carries a literal sword, and a misstep can mean punishment, forced labor, or death, while a quirky detail catches your eye. A tiny, worn ledger where the headman keeps detailed notes of each family's contribution, every stroke of ink representing someone's sweat, back-breaking labor, and the precarious balance of survival. And you realize that these ledgers are more than accounting. They're lifelines, maps of human endurance, and tools for political navigation. Time travel tip number 10 ringing in your head. Always document, memorize, and observe local hierarchies, because knowledge here can prevent a blade from finding your neck. And as villagers begin to debate how to allocate their remaining rice and labor, you notice subtle politics unfolding. Families squabble quietly over quotas. Young men argue about who is better suited for guard duty, and elders interject with calm authority, their words carrying the weight of experience while keeping tension from erupting into violence, the viral context sharpening. The micro-politics of a village under daimyo rule are a lesson in diplomacy, strategy, and survival, where the smallest gesture, nod, or glance can shift alliances or avoid conflict. And you imagine applying this to your own survival, keeping your head low, observing relationships, and understanding who wields influence while remaining an invisible participant. Your modern jacket and accent marking you as an outsider, yet your eyes soaking in every detail, and a dry joke forms in your mind. You thought office politics were tricky. Try navigating life and death negotiations with a sword-bearing lord looming in the background, and peasants, livelihoods hanging on your observation skills. And as the headman recounts the harvest and distributes labor obligations, you notice a small charm, an omamori, tucked behind the ledger, a talisman believed to protect him from misjudgment and the daimyo's wrath. A reminder that superstition and pragmatism coexist here, while historians debate how much faith-guided decisions versus pure survival instinct. The discussion buzzing in your mind as you witness families reluctantly volunteering extra labor or hiding small portions of grain, subtle acts of defiance or necessity that reveal the constant tension between obedience and self-preservation. And the air is thick with dust, sweat, and anxiety. Every movement observed, every whisper potentially reportable to the Lord. A stark illustration of how feudal Japan's power structure infiltrated even the smallest village decisions. And you feel the weight of observation pressing down on you, learning fast that survival requires more than physical endurance. It requires reading human behavior, predicting reactions, and balancing compliance with discretion, while a child offers you a cup of tepid water, their wide eyes reflecting curiosity and fear, and you take it gratefully, your modern senses acutely aware that small kindnesses are as significant as strategic thinking in this world. And as the day stretches, the village adjusts to the daimyo's requirements, preparing for inspections, extra labor, and potential punishment, while simultaneously tending to crops, repairing homes, and consoling those injured or traumatized from raids. A delicate balancing act that leaves you both exhausted and fascinated. The viral hook landing: if you think surviving one raid was tough, wait until you navigate politics, power, and loyalty in a world where a miscounted grain or a wrong word could spell doom, and you imagine how each interaction, decision, and observation here is a survival lesson, honing your senses, patience, and understanding of the complex human web that defines life in Sengoku Japan, all while keeping your modern perspective safely hidden and a dry joke whispers in your mind. You thought your boss was scary. Try negotiating with villagers terrified of your lord, and a sword behind every word. And as the sun begins to dip, shadows lengthening across the mud-slicked streets, you realize that surviving feudal Japan isn't just physical. It's political, psychological, and intensely social. A lesson that will define your next encounter, teasing the next chapter, where loyalty, espionage, and unexpected alliances reveal that even a day in a single village can feel like a lifetime under the daimyo's gaze. As the village settles into the uneasy rhythm of recovery from raids and compliance with the daimyo's demands, you begin to notice subtle, almost invisible currents of tension weaving through every interaction. A whispered conversation here, a furtive glance there, as villagers move like shadows across the muddy streets, and it dawns on you that surviving feudal Japan is as much about information as it is about labor or physical endurance, with well-known historical facts grounding you. During the Sengoku period, espionage, secret alliances, and rumor were essential tools for both lords and peasants. Spies could be anywhere, hired, coerced, or born of curiosity, and the consequences of discovery were deadly. And you crouch behind a half-collapsed fence watching two villagers exchange a folded note, the symbols on the paper tiny yet precise, their hands trembling slightly, signaling intelligence, allegiance, or warning. And a quirky detail catches your attention. A small cat perched atop a barrel, its ears twitching at every whisper, seemingly aware of secrets more than most humans, a reminder that observation in feudal Japan extended to every living being, and time travel tip number 11 smacks you with reality. Always watch, always listen, because even casual conversation can be life or death, and you realize that the headman's ledger is only part of the equation. Social intelligence, knowledge of rival clans, and the ability to read body language are equally vital. Your modern assumptions failing to account for how quickly loyalties can shift, how rumors can spark rebellion or panic, and how a single overheard phrase can alter survival chances, while the villagers carefully navigate interactions, some feigning ignorance, others subtly passing information along hidden networks, the viral context sharpening. This is not drama, it's real strategy, a living web of intelligence and counterintelligence, and you imagine yourself trying to blend in, mimicking posture, tone, and speech patterns, your modern presence screaming outsider, yet forcing you to learn faster. And a dry joke forms. You thought school gossip was dangerous. Try navigating espionage where one wrong word can cost you your life. And as you scan the village, you notice a young man whispering to a woman at the edge of the rice paddies, their hands brushing over a small bundle of rice seeds and folded papers, signaling an exchange that could save or doom families. A delicate act of risk and trust. While historians debate the prevalence of peasant subterfuge, noting that while overt rebellion was rare, clever deception, hidden caches, and secret alliances were common survival strategies, the subtlety of which is breathtaking to witness, and you mentally catalogue each action, realizing that observation, discretion, and patience are as essential as strength or speed in this environment, and quirky small details abound. A stray chicken scattering across the mud, a faint whistle warning of approaching figures, a hidden charm tucked under a roof tile, all forming a complex interlocking system of cues and warnings that villagers have honed over generations, while the daimyo's distant influence looms, his samurai acting as both enforcers and unintentional spies, collecting information through intimidation or casual questioning, their presence a constant reminder that power in feudal Japan is maintained not only by force, but by knowledge. Your heart racing as you realize that in such a networked system, even a modern mistake, like mispronouncing a word, failing to observe local hierarchy, or noticing the wrong detail, could be catastrophic. And you feel the tension in the air like electricity as a rival faction. S-banner is sighted on the horizon, villagers freezing, hands subtly reaching for concealed weapons or signaling hidden exits, while a small child clutches a folded paper tied to a string, likely a message for allies or scouts. And you can't help but marvel at the ingenuity and bravery required to exist in this constant web of observation, loyalty, and survival, your mind racing with scenarios of hiding, signaling, and subtly influencing outcomes without revealing your modern identity, while a dry joke bubbles up. You thought keeping secrets from roommates was hard. Try hiding information from a samurai patrol, rival clans, and suspicious neighbors all at once. And as the day stretches on, alliances shift like sand, secrets are traded and misinterpreted, and you begin to understand that survival in feudal Japan is about reading the invisible rules as much as wielding a hoe, obeying a lord, or avoiding a raid, the viral hook hitting hard. If you think you could last a day, remember that even the smallest misstep in espionage or social navigation could undo everything. And as the sun dips low, casting long shadows across mud-slicked streets and thatched rooftops, you realize that understanding the subtle interplay of secrets, loyalties, and rivalries is not just a lesson in history, it is a live simulation of human ingenuity and caution under constant threat. Teasing the next chapter, where deception, cunning, and a sudden threat push your survival skills to the absolute limit. Just as the sun begins to climb higher, casting long, distorted shadows across the muddy streets and thatched rooftops, an unmistakable alarm pierces the air. The clatter of hooves, shouted commands, and the metallic jangle of armor signal that another threat has arrived, your heart thudding in your chest as you realize that surviving feudal Japan isn't a single ordeal, but a continuous gauntlet. And you duck instinctively behind a low fence, your soaked sneakers sinking into the mud, watching as the villagers spring into practiced motion, grabbing whatever makeshift weapons they can find, from sharpened hoes to heavy clubs, while others coordinate barricades using bamboo stakes, carts, and debris. Their movements precise despite exhaustion, a clear display of historical reality. During the Sengoku period, villages were often forced to defend themselves with whatever resources they had. Improvisation and quick thinking essential for survival, and a quirky detail catches your eye. A small girl perching atop a barrel with a slingshot in hand, her tiny frame poised like a sentinel, a reminder that even children were drawn into the logic of defense. And time travel tip number 12 crystallizes. Always observe the locals, because their methods of survival, defense, and signaling can teach more in minutes than books can in years. And the attackers, whether bandits, rogue samurai, or rival clans, is unclear. Their banners indistinct through the morning haze, but their intent is obvious. Destruction, plunder, or assertion of power, while your modern mind struggles to process the intensity of coordination, strategy, and raw courage displayed by villagers who, mere hours ago, were bent under rice field labor, now transformed into a makeshift militia defending home and family, the viral context sharpening. This is not cinematic exaggeration, it's living, breathing survival, and you picture yourself trying to blend in, lifting a barrel, signaling with a flag, or mimicking a seasoned villager's posture. Every movement critical, your modern jacket sticking wet and muddy against you, exposing you as an outsider. And a dry joke escapes. You thought boot camp was tough. Try defending a village with no reinforcements and no instructions beyond survival instinct, while simultaneously keeping your identity hidden, and as the attackers charge, a cacophony erupts, shouts, the clash of wood and metal, the cries of children and livestock, mud flying in every direction, a chaotic ballet of fear, skill, and desperate strategy. And your eyes are drawn to small details. A tiny bell tied to a post ringing to signal a flanking movement, a cat darting between legs to divert attention, a woman dragging a child out of harm's way. Each moment a lesson in observation, improvisation, and prioritization, while historians debate how often peasant-led defenses succeeded versus being annihilated. The truth being, survival hinged on a combination of luck, intelligence, and courage, and you feel your pulse match the tempo of the battle. Imagining how these villagers learned over generations to read signs, anticipate attacks, and coordinate silently yet effectively, your mind racing through escape routes, potential allies, and defensive positions, every decision weighted with life or death significance, while the attackers push forward testing the villagers' barricades, only to be met with well-aimed slingshots, hurled stones, and unexpected resistance. And you notice a young boy, barely 10, rolling a heavy log into the path of an oncoming assailant. A bold and ingenious tactic, reflecting the same creativity adults employ, and time travel tip number 13 hits. You may be physically weaker, but observation, timing, and courage can extend your survival far beyond instinct alone. While the sun climbs higher, heat baking mud and sweat into your skin, the air thick with tension, fear, and adrenaline, your modern mind awash with respect for these people, whose entire lives are survival exercises, and the viral hook lands. If you think a day in feudal Japan is about rice, taxes, or watching samurai, think again. It's about anticipating threats, improvising defense, and surviving chaos that strikes without warning. And as the attackers falter, the villagers regroup, resetting barricades, tending to the injured, and signaling allies hidden in the rice paddies or on rooftops. A delicate balance of offense and defense, instinct and planning, while smaller Mamori charms sway on poles and doorways, their significance more psychological than magical, yet essential to morale. And you realize that survival here is as much about mental acuity as physical strength. Every glance, gesture, and whispered instruction a potential lifeline, a dry joke pressing itself to the surface. You thought tactical drills were tough. Try coordinating a village-wide defense while your muscles ache. Your shoes are ruined, and one wrong step could be fatal. And as the sun climbs to its zenith, the attackers retreat or are repelled, leaving behind mud-smeared streets, toppled fences, and a village that has survived yet again through ingenuity, cooperation, and sheer grit. And you, the time-traveling outsider, absorb the lesson. The Sengoku period is not a romanticized era of honor and spectacle, but a world where every moment is survival. Every relationship is negotiation, and every sound, movement, or shadow could be the difference between life and death. Teasing the next chapter, where reflection, rebuilding, and preparation for the next challenge reveal that no single day in feudal Japan is ever truly over. As the adrenaline of the sudden attack wanes and the sun begins its descent, casting a warm glow over the mud-slicked streets, you take a moment to step back and observe the villagers as they move with methodical efficiency, repairing fences, righting toppled carts, and tending to the injured. Their faces streaked with soot, sweat, and mud, yet carrying a resilience that you cannot help but admire. And well-known historical facts anchor you. Sengoku-era villages were perpetually engaged in cycles of labor, defense, and negotiation, with survival dependent not just on physical strength, but on social cohesion, quick thinking, and intimate knowledge of the land and its threats. And you notice the headman coordinating teams with precision, pointing toward broken bamboo stakes, assigning families to rebuild sections of the wall, and even subtly noting where grain may have gone missing during the raid. His ledger open, ink smudged with mud and sweat, a tangible map of human endurance. While a quirky detail captures your attention, a small child carefully stacking discarded boards into a barricade while humming a tune their mother taught them, a reminder that even in chaos, routine and small comforts persist, and time travel tip number 14 hits. Observe routines because they reveal priorities, hierarchy, and hidden knowledge that can keep you alive. And as you wade through mud toward the communal fire, where villagers boil water and mend clothing, your mind races to connect everything you've witnessed. The rice fields' grueling labor, samurai oversight, rival clan raids, espionage, and the improvised defense. All threads of a complex, unforgiving tapestry, the viral context sharpening. Surviving feudal Japan requires not just endurance, but adaptability, cunning, and humility. And you imagine applying this to your own predicament, mimicking posture, learning local signals, quietly helping rebuild, and observing every nuance while keeping your modern identity obscured. And a dry joke bubbles up. You thought team-building exercises were hard. Try rebuilding a village under the constant threat of raiders and samurai inspection, mud up to your knees, and sweat stinging your eyes, while simultaneously learning invisible social rules and survival tactics. And as the villagers distribute repaired tools, fetch water, and offer small portions of rice to the youngest and weakest, you notice the quiet interactions that maintain social cohesion, an elder offering guidance, a young woman silently assisting an injured neighbor, children mimicking adult roles, the headman balancing fairness with efficiency, and each gesture reinforcing bonds critical to survival. While historians debate whether these routines were purely functional or also psychological mechanisms to maintain morale in a world defined by constant peril. Your modern mind absorbing lessons in human behavior, community, and crisis management that no textbook could convey, and quirky details abound. A cat weaving between ankles, seemingly aware of human hierarchies, a small straw charm tied to a repaired gate, a woman whispering a prayer over the fire for protection and luck, all signs of the integration of superstition, faith, and practicality in daily life. While the sun dips lower, shadows lengthening across the village, and you take a moment to reflect on your own exhaustion, wet clothes, aching muscles, and mud-smeared face, realizing that a single day in this era delivers lessons in patience, observation, adaptability, and humility. Your modern conveniences stripped away, forcing you to confront the raw mechanics of survival and the viral hooklands. If you think you could last a day in Sengoku Japan, remember, it's not just about strength or bravery. It's about empathy, observation, and the ability to read people, the environment, and subtle cues that indicate danger, opportunity, or alliance. And as the villagers finish repairs and gather near the communal fire, the air thick with smoke, warmth, and the scent of boiling rice, you understand that survival here is both physical and psychological, a continuous loop of labor, vigilance, and social negotiation, and a dry joke presses itself to the surface. You thought corporate deadlines were stressful. Try meeting a daimyo's expectations, avoiding raiders, and keeping a village functioning all at once, mud dripping from your sleeves, while also learning secret alliances and hidden signals, and as dusk falls and lanterns are lit, casting flickering light over the restored huts and paddies, you realize that this day, like every day in feudal Japan, is a complex lesson in resilience, strategy, and human ingenuity, teasing the final chapter where culmination, ultimate reflection, and the harshest truths of surviving a day in Sengoku Japan will reveal whether a modern outsider like you could ever truly endure this relentless, unpredictable, and unforgiving world as night falls over the mud-slicked village, lanterns casting trembling shadows across the thatched roofs and puddle-filled streets. You finally pause to catch your breath, only to realize that in feudal Japan, the day is never truly over, and survival is an unrelenting cycle of labor, vigilance, and social navigation, with well-known historical facts reinforcing the brutal reality that even after raids are repelled, rice is accounted for and fences rebuilt. Villages remain under constant threat from rival clans, unpredictable samurai demands, and the harshness of nature itself, your sneakers squelching with every step as you wade through the remains of toppled carts and broken bamboo, while villagers continue to move with quiet efficiency, repairing, cooking, and watching for signs of renewed danger, and a quirky detail catches your eye. A small wooden doll perched on a roof beam, its straw hair tattered, yet believed to ward off evil, a fragile symbol of hope and superstition in a world defined by uncertainty. And time travel tip number 15 hits hard. Never underestimate the psychological toll of constant danger, because mental resilience can be as vital as physical strength. And as you observe the headman conferring with elders and young men about night watches, hidden supply caches, and warning signals, you realize that feudal life is a delicate balancing act, where one mistake, a miscounted ration, a poorly tied charm, a misread gesture, can have cascading consequences. And the viral context sharpens. The lessons you are absorbing are not hypothetical. They are living demonstrations of human ingenuity under relentless pressure, and your mind races as you try to internalize strategies for observation, improvisation, and cautious participation, blending modern knowledge with ancient survival tactics, while a dry joke presses through. You thought marathon days were tough. Try surviving 12 hours of mud, labor, raids, espionage, and politics, and then repeat tomorrow because there is no reset button in Sengoku Japan. And as the villagers organize makeshift patrols, repair shelters, and distribute the remaining rice, you notice small but telling gestures. A young boy signaling silently to a neighbor about movement near the tree line, a woman carefully hiding extra grain in a corner, a man reinforcing a weak fence post with scrap wood, all subtle but crucial adaptations honed over generations, while historians debate how common it was for peasants to actively resist, adapt, or negotiate with samurai and daimyo. Your modern mind marveling at how survival here depends as much on cunning and discretion as on strength or obedience, and quirky details abound. A cat weaving through the legs of villagers as if sensing danger, the faint sound of a flute signaling safety, or alert a tiny amulet tied to a post swaying in the night breeze, all illustrating how superstition, psychology, and practicality intertwine in daily life, and your pulse quickens as a distant howl. The creak of a door and the rustle of bamboo remind you that threats never truly sleep. A sobering lesson in perpetual vigilance, and time travel tip 16 slams home. Your modern assumption of safety is irrelevant. Awareness, adaptability, and humility are your only real weapons. while the villagers' coordination, tacit understanding of social hierarchies and silent signals reveal an intricate network of intelligence and trust built over generations, the viral hook landing. You thought you could last a day. Consider the endurance, observation, and constant negotiation required to survive not just a single raid, but the continuous pressure of a world where power, fear, and survival are inseparable. And as you help carry water, mend a fence, and quietly follow orders without attracting attention, you reflect on your journey from the first moment your sneakers sank into mud, through the rice fields, samurai encounters, espionage, rival clan raids, and village politics, realizing that each challenge built upon the last, layering lessons in endurance, cunning, and human psychology, and a dry joke escapes. You thought obstacle courses were intense. Try navigating a day where the stakes are real, the mud never dries, and the only reward for effort is the chance to survive another sunrise, while your mind catalogues every interaction, gesture, and improvised tactic for future survival. And as lanterns flicker, fires burn low, and the village settles into tense vigilance, you finally grasp the harshest reality of feudal Japan. No comfort, no pause, no guarantee. Only constant adaptation, observation, and courage in a world where every day is a test. Every neighbor a potential ally or informant, and every shadow could conceal danger. Your modern assumptions stripped away, leaving you with a profound understanding of what it truly means to last a day in Sengoku Japan. The final viral hook resonating: if you think this world is romantic, heroic, or cinematic, think again. It is relentless, unforgiving, and brutally educational, and surviving it requires more than strength or luck. It requires intelligence, humility, and the unwavering ability to read people, environment, and circumstance at every moment, concluding your journey with the sobering truth that a single day in feudal Japan is a lifetime compressed into hours, and for a modern outsider, it is a world few could endure and fewer would survive intact. As night descends over the mud-slicked village, the last rays of sun casting elongated shadows across the thatched rooftops and puddle-filled streets, you finally feel the weight of the day in a way your modern muscles and mind have never experienced. Every step of your mud-caked sneakers sending shivers of fatigue through your legs, your back screaming from hours of lifting, bending, and shoveling in the rice paddies, while your mind buzzes with the endless calculations required to survive, and well-known historical facts anchor your reflection. During the Sengoku period, villages were not merely passive backdrops for samurai raids and political intrigue. They were microcosms of constant vigilance, where peasants, children, and elders alike developed survival instincts that balanced labor, social cohesion, superstition, and observation under the pressure of potential violence, taxation, and environmental hazards. And you notice the subtle, almost invisible cues that reveal this perpetual tension. The way villagers' heads turn at the slightest sound, how hands hover near weapons, even while repairing fences, how eyes flit toward shadows in a rhythm developed over generations, and a quirky detail catches your attention. A stray cat, its fur bristling, slipping silently between puddles, pausing, listening, observing, a miniature embodiment of the alertness every human here must maintain, while time travel tip number 17 resonates. Never assume any moment is safe. Every sound, smell, and movement can be significant, because even the quietest night can erupt into chaos without warning. And your modern mind, accustomed to the comfort of locks, walls, and alarm systems, struggles to comprehend the intensity of constant awareness, your pulse quickening with each creak of bamboo, rustle of straw, or distant animal cry. And you notice villagers performing subtle rituals. A mother repositioning a small straw doll over her doorway, a boy tapping on a barrel as a coded signal, elders whispering prayers to Inari, gestures that blend superstition, psychological reinforcement, and practical communication, their importance heightened by the very real consequences of misjudgment. While historians debate the psychological and social impact of these practices, noting that the repetitive, disciplined observation likely trained both mind and body for survival, reducing panic, increasing alertness, and fostering cohesion. And as you crouch behind a low fence squelching mud rising around your ankles, you realize the mental burden of a single day extends far beyond labor or physical threat. It encompasses constant calculation, vigilance, and social reading, interpreting subtle gestures, expressions, and conversations, anticipating samurai inspections, rival clan movements, and even fellow villagers' intentions. Your modern assumptions of safety dissolving under the pressure of observation, and quirky details continue to layer. The faint glimmer of an omamori tied to a corner post, the soft whistle of someone signaling a patrol, a child clutching a wooden sword while perched atop a cart, all illustrating a system where every micro-action communicates information, enforces hierarchy, or preserves life, while your inner monologue races, imagining contingencies for every potential scenario. What if a samurai misinterprets your posture? What if a neighbor reports your unfamiliar clothes or accent? What if a hidden danger emerges from the shadows? And time travel tip 18 hits. You must be hyper-aware, patient, and adaptable, because errors are costly and consequences immediate, while the viral context sharpens. The invisible pressures not seen in movies or anime define life in Sengoku Japan as much as rice, raids, and samurai, and your imagination stretches as you mentally rehearse strategies for blending in, observing patterns, and subtly contributing without attracting scrutiny. The sensation of mental exhaustion pressing down like a physical weight. Muscles already trembling, your senses overloaded by sound, smell, movement, and the endless mental calculations. And a dry joke forms. You thought exams were stressful. Try staying alert for 12 hours in mud, with the constant threat of blades, raids, inspections, and misjudged gestures while still trying to understand social hierarchies and hidden alliances. And as the night deepens, the villagers' subtle signals, slight nods, whispers, repositioning of barriers, and careful distribution of resources reveal the invisible scaffolding that maintains both order and survival. While historians argue over the prevalence of espionage loyalty tests and passive resistance among peasants, their workaday heroism often hidden beneath the visible labor of rice fences and repairs. And your modern mind struggles to absorb the interconnectedness of every action. A miscounted ration, a misread glance, or a forgotten prayer could ripple across the village, influencing morale, cohesion, and survival outcomes, and quirky small details persist. The faint hiss of steam from cooking fires, a lantern swinging gently in the breeze, a child imitating adult vigilance with a tiny stick in hand. Each a reminder that even in ordinary acts, preparation, observation, and alertness are survival tools. While your body craves rest and your mind fights fatigue, you realize that the psychological strain rivals the physical. Each second a test of endurance, each sound a potential threat, each gesture a puzzle demanding interpretation. And time travel tip 19 solidifies. You must integrate observation, intuition, and action seamlessly, because Sengoku Japan punishes hesitation or ignorance while the viral hook lands. You thought surviving one raid or one day in rice fields was hard? Multiply that mental strain by months, years, and constant vigilance, and you begin to grasp why modern outsiders could not last even a single day. And as you quietly assist villagers in small tasks, repositioning boards, observing signals, helping with fire and water, you feel both exhaustion and admiration, witnessing firsthand how humans adapt, innovate, and endure. Mental acuity as vital as physical strength, and a reflective joke bubbles up. You thought sleep deprivation apps were challenging. Try calculating threats, observing micro-behaviors, and predicting potential danger while your muscles scream. Your shoes are ruined, and shadows conceal life or death risks, while the villagers' composure impresses you. Their alertness, subtle gestures, quiet communication, and rituals form a lattice of survival, integrating superstition, psychology, and practical strategy. Every detail a learned skill honed over generations. And as the moon rises, casting silver light over puddles, rooftops, and mud-choked streets, you finally understand that a day in Sengoku Japan is a constant mental marathon, a high-stakes test of observation, calculation, empathy, and social intelligence, leaving you with one undeniable realization. Modern humans, accustomed to comfort, safety, and routine, are ill-equipped for this world, where vigilance never sleeps, consequences are immediate, and survival demands every ounce of mind, body, and intuition. teasing the next section where physical, social, and moral challenges converge to create the ultimate test of endurance, cunning, and humanity in the unforgiving world of feudal Japan. As dawn slowly breaks over the mud-slicked village, casting a dim golden glow across thatched rooftops and puddle-filled streets, you begin to witness the hidden complexities of life in Sengoku Japan, realizing that survival was never just a physical endeavor, but a tangled web of moral dilemmas, social obligations, and shifting loyalties, your muscles still trembling from the previous day, as labor and skirmishes, while your mind races to absorb the lessons hidden in every glance, gesture, and whispered conversation, and well-known historical facts anchor this reality. During the Sengoku period, villagers often faced impossible choices, caught between the demands of samurai, the ambitions of daimyo, and the ever-present threat of rival clans, with loyalty often defined not by morality, but by survival, alliances, and political necessity. And you notice subtle interactions that reveal these conflicts. The headman quietly negotiating with a samurai to spare a section of grain, while another elder secretly redistributes a portion to families at risk of starvation. A woman whispering instructions to hide tools that might be requisitioned for a raid, and a child tugging at his mother's sleeve, signaling fear and confusion, while being subtly taught how to navigate power dynamics. While time travel tip number 20 resonates, you must recognize that moral choices in this era were rarely clear-cut. Every action had consequences, and neutrality was often impossible, and quirky details abound. A small wooden charm tied to a fence post signaling allegiance to a particular samurai. A hidden note folded in straw indicating a secret pact with a neighboring village. A faint mark on a rice sack showing it was redirected without detection. Each a lesson in the subtle codes and clandestine maneuvers essential for survival. While your modern mind struggles to reconcile these actions with contemporary notions of right and wrong, understanding that in a world ruled by constant threat, pragmatism, observation, and discretion often outweighed ethics or sentiment, and the viral context sharpens. You thought surviving physical labor and raids was the hardest part. Consider the constant mental gymnastics of negotiating loyalties, anticipating betrayals, and making life or death decisions with incomplete information. And as you follow villagers carrying out these hidden strategies, you notice the nuanced communication, the slight nods, gestures, and coded signals that convey instructions without words, a language of survival built over generations. While historians note that such practices were widespread, enabling villages to navigate the overlapping pressures of taxation, warlord demands, and samurai oversight, your mind racing to catalog, interpret, and mimic these subtle cues and dry humor surfaces. You thought office politics were complicated. Try balancing the needs of a starving family, the demands of a samurai patrol, and a secret pact with a neighboring village, all while keeping your identity hidden and your body exhausted. And as the day unfolds, the moral weight of decisions becomes tangible. A young man hesitates to report stolen grain, fearing punishment, yet knowing families depend on that rice. An elder argues for compliance with a daimyo's tax demands to avoid a raid, while another quietly hides surplus tools in case of conflict. A mother teaches her child how to lie convincingly if confronted. The village's survival strategy blending deception, ethics, and instinct. And your modern mind reels at the sheer complexity of navigating such a layered social ecosystem, while quirky micro-details continue. The faint sound of a bell signaling a warning, a straw doll tied to a cart indicating temporary allegiance, a small carved token passed between hands like a secret code, all underscoring how everyday objects became instruments of negotiation, survival, and subtle power. And well-known historical facts remind you that such moral compromises were often necessary, as villages had little autonomy and constant surveillance by samurai meant that a single wrong move could result in death, confiscation of food, or destruction of property, teaching you that ethical clarity in Sengoku Japan was often a luxury only outsiders could imagine. While time travel tip 21 crystallizes, you must weigh every action, anticipate consequences, and navigate loyalties carefully, because misjudging even a subtle signal could be fatal. And the viral hooklands, you thought surviving the rice fields or fending off raids was enough? In reality, It's the unseen battles, the ethical quandaries, loyalty tests, and social navigation that define whether a person can endure a single day in this unforgiving world. And as you silently participate in these delicate maneuvers, carrying water, moving rice sacks, or observing signals, you sense the tension, fear, and strategy that permeate every decision, every action, every interaction, while a dry, reflective joke surfaces. You thought multitasking was hard. Try surviving a day where moral judgment, physical labor, strategic thinking, social intelligence, and stealth all converge into one continuous test. And as the villagers execute these tactics seamlessly, you notice the deep lessons embedded in ordinary acts, cooperation and deception. As survival, subtle signals as power rituals, and superstition as morale. The constant weighing of risk and reward, and your modern assumptions about morality. Fairness and security crumble under the reality that in Sengoku, Japan, survival demanded fluid ethics, adaptability, and unrelenting attention to every detail. While the night grows darker and the village's activities shift to maintenance guard rotations and preparation for potential threats. Your mind cataloging every observed nuance, your muscles aching, your mental focus stretched to the limits. And the viral context hits. If you think a modern day is complex, consider a day in Sengoku, Japan, where every choice, every glance, every action is a potential life or death gamble. And as you reflect on this, you recognize that the interplay of loyalty, ethics, and survival creates a world far more challenging than any physical labor or martial confrontation. Teasing the next section where ultimate tests of endurance, decision-making under pressure, and navigation of political and social hierarchies converge to determine whether a modern outsider could ever last, leaving you with the sobering realization that Sengoku Japan's greatest challenges were not just samurai or rice fields, but the intricate, relentless demands of human interaction, strategy, and morality in a world that brooks no hesitation, mercy, or error. As dawn stretches across the mud-choked village, painting the thatched roofs and puddle-filled streets in a gray-gold light, you realize that surviving in Sengoku, Japan, is no longer about isolated trials like rice fields, samurai patrols, or moral dilemmas, but about the seamless integration of every skill you have learned. The physical endurance from laboring in ankle-deep water, the mental vigilance honed from constant observation, the social intelligence acquired from reading subtle gestures and coded signals, and the moral flexibility necessary to navigate impossible choices, while well-known historical facts anchor your awareness. Villages during the Sengoku period existed under near constant threat from rival clans, unpredictable samurai demands, and natural hazards, requiring a holistic mastery of survival that combined strength, endurance, strategy, and diplomacy. And as you follow the villagers coordinating tasks, you notice the intricate choreography of survival. Families working in synchrony to repair fences, redistribute food, maintain watch over rice stores, and signal each other discreetly when patrolling samurai or potential raiders approach. Every action a lesson in multitasking under pressure, while quirky details abound. A child quietly sliding a small omamori into a sack, an elder signaling a warning by tapping a board, a hidden scratch on a wall indicating a safe escape route, each reinforcing the invisible infrastructure of resilience. And time travel tip number 22 solidifies. You must integrate observation, physical ability, social understanding, and adaptability continuously, because failure in any one area jeopardizes all others. Your pulse quickening as you attempt to mimic the village's seamless coordination, carrying water, adjusting fences, hiding tools, all while maintaining the correct posture, gestures, and expressions to avoid drawing the wrong attention. While a dry joke presses through, you thought triathlons were hard. Try a day in Sengoku, Japan, where you sprint, squat, lift, dodge, observe, negotiate, and calculate consequences simultaneously, while standing in mud and avoiding a samurai's notice. And the viral context sharpens. The ultimate test of endurance is not isolated. It's cumulative, testing physical stamina, mental acuity, social intelligence, moral judgment, and the ability to integrate every lesson into a continuous stream of survival strategy. And as you notice villagers signaling discreetly, redistributing grain, repositioning boards, performing rituals and whispering instructions, your modern brain struggles to absorb the layers of coordination, anticipation, and adaptation, while historians note that survival here demanded more than raw strength or courage. It required strategic thinking, quick assessment of risk, the ability to read both people and environment, and the capacity to act fluidly without hesitation. And quirky small details continue to layer. The soft glow of lanterns reflecting in puddles, a faint whistle conveying a message across the village, a straw doll tied to a cart signaling temporary allegiance, all demonstrating that communication, superstition, and practical strategy were intertwined. While you mentally simulate every potential contingency, anticipating samurai inspections, neighborly conflicts, hidden raids, and natural hazards, cataloging every pattern and signal for optimal action, and dry humor surfaces. You thought modern multitasking was impressive. Try combining farm labor, espionage, moral negotiation, social reading, and threat assessment simultaneously, in mud and exhaustion, with life or death stakes. And as the villagers coordinate their efforts seamlessly, executing defensive, productive, and communicative actions without verbal exposition, you realize that the mental and physical integration required is staggering, the viral hook landing. You thought surviving a day meant avoiding swords or completing chores. In reality, survival requires flawless integration of endurance, vigilance, social intelligence, moral flexibility, and strategic planning, the invisible layers of coordination making the difference between life and death. While your body quivers from exertion, your mind strains to process every subtle cue, and your awareness stretches to its absolute limit. And as the day progresses, the villagers continue their orchestrated efforts, guarding perimeters, repairing infrastructure, redistributing supplies, signaling silently, performing rituals, and tending to the vulnerable, demonstrating that no single skill suffices. But mastery emerges from the simultaneous application of all skills, while historians emphasize that this cumulative endurance was central to survival in a world dominated by unpredictability, warfare, and rigid social hierarchies. Your modern assumptions about individual heroism and linear problem-solving collapsing under the weight of integrated sustained effort, and quirky details persist. A faint creak signaling movement near the perimeter, a child hiding extra grain, an elder quietly redirecting water flow to aid irrigation, all subtle lessons in strategy, coordination, and observation. While time travel tip 23 resonates, you must think in systems, not isolated acts, blending observation, labor, social strategy, moral judgment, and intuition continuously, because failure in even one domain imperils the whole, and the viral context drives the point home. You thought surviving raids, labor, or samurai encounters was enough? The ultimate test combines all challenges, and the modern mind cannot fully grasp the mental, physical, social, and moral integration demanded for even a single day. And as exhaustion mounts, mud clinging to your soaked clothing, muscles trembling and every nerve alert, you continue to mimic the villagers' coordinated actions, silently observing, adjusting, and responding to signals, realizing that the line between success and failure is razor thin, and a dry joke bubbles up. You thought obstacle courses were intense? Try surviving a fully integrated day of labor, observation, social navigation, moral negotiation, and constant threat assessment while mud-slicked, exhausted, and under scrutiny. And as the sun reaches its zenith, shadows shortening, villagers still execute their routines with precision, balancing labor, vigilance, and communication, your modern mind racing to keep pace, cataloging, imitating, and internalizing strategies, while historians note that the ability to integrate these layers of survival is what distinguished those who endured from those who perished. And quirky details continue to layer. The soft hiss of steam, a small whistle, a fleeting shadow signaling a hidden hazard, each reinforcing the need for constant awareness, adaptability, and coordination, while your mental, physical, and social faculties are stretched to the absolute limit and the viral hook lands. You think a day is hard. Imagine this constant integration, where a misstep in judgment, attention, or action can ripple across every layer of survival, and as dusk approaches, casting long shadows across puddles, rooftops, and mud-choked streets, you finally feel the staggering complexity, intensity, and relentlessness of life in Sengoku, Japan, realizing that the ultimate survival test is not just labor, threat avoidance, or moral choice. It is the seamless, continuous application of endurance, vigilance, social intelligence, moral flexibility, and strategic planning, leaving a modern outsider with the sobering conclusion that the integration required is almost beyond human capacity, teasing the next chapter, where reflection, culmination, and final lessons in endurance, adaptability, and historical insight will crystallize the ultimate reality. Surviving in feudal Japan is a test few could endure, even for a single day. As night descends for the second time over the mud-choked village, lanterns flickering weakly against the pervasive damp, and the last echoes of labor, hoofbeats, and whispered signals fade into the darkness, you finally have a moment to pause, and the weight of everything you have experienced, physical exhaustion from endless rice field toil, mental strain from constant vigilance, the social and moral acrobatics required to navigate loyalty conflicts, and the subtle observation of coded gestures, rituals, and daily survival tactics settles heavily upon your shoulders. And well-known historical facts remind you that the Sengoku period was an era defined by perpetual instability, where constant warfare, unpredictable samurai demands, taxation, environmental hazards, and rival clan raids combined to create a world in which survival required not just brute strength, but continuous mental acuity, emotional regulation, social intelligence, and adaptability. And as you reflect on the day's cumulative experiences, from wading ankle-deep through mud to mimicking villagers, subtle signals to silently negotiating your own moral and ethical choices in a landscape of constant threat, you begin to understand the staggering difficulty of merely existing in this era, while quirky details keep resurfacing in your memory. The child with the wooden sword pretending to defend the village, the small omamori tied to the samurai saddle swaying gently in the evening breeze, the faint glimmer of a candle reflecting in a puddle as a signal of safety, and the rhythmic tapping of a board as a covert warning, each a testament to the ingenuity, observation, and resilience required to endure. And time travel tip number 24 echoes in your mind. You must never underestimate the depth of preparation, observation, and instinct necessary to survive, because every small detail, every fleeting glance, and every whispered signal can determine life or death, while the viral context sharpens. The lessons you are absorbing are not merely academic, they are lived, dynamic, and relentless, illustrating that a single day in Sengoku, Japan, compresses the experiences of endurance, vigilance, moral navigation, and social strategy into an almost unimaginable continuum. And as you attempt to catalog every action, reaction, and decision you witnessed, from the village's synchronized labor to the subtle manipulations of resources, from the coded signals used to avoid samurai scrutiny, to the small acts of defiance and cunning that preserved families' safety, you begin to see the interconnectedness of every element, every micro-strategy, every ritual, every subtle signal, forming an invisible latticework of survival that required the simultaneous deployment of physical, mental, moral, and social faculties, and quirky reflections invade your consciousness. You thought modern multitasking was challenging. Try surviving a day where you must bend, lift, signal, read, deceive, negotiate, and observe simultaneously, all while standing in mud, avoiding detection, and ensuring the well-being of your own survival and that of others. While historians remind us that much of this invisible work, the hidden intelligence of peasants, the coded signals, the subtle distribution of resources, the quiet moral compromises, was essential to the functioning of villages in an era without formalized communication or social safety nets, your modern assumptions about safety, clarity, and fairness collapsing under the immense complexity and subtlety of these survival networks. And your mind races as you replay every challenge encountered. The relentless rice field labor with its cold water, sinking mud, blinding sun, aching muscles, and exhaustion. The tense encounters with samurai, whose presence enforced law, taxation, and fear. The moral dilemmas of hiding grain, signaling allies, or complying with unjust orders. The mental strain of constant observation, predicting threats and interpreting subtle social signals. And all of these layers converge to create an overwhelming yet instructive understanding that the cumulative demands of Sengoku Japan were not only physically punishing, but psychologically sophisticated, socially complex, and morally intricate. And quirky micro-details continue to illuminate this truth. The straw doll with a tilted grin mocking your naivety, a child's whisper conveying an urgent warning, a woman's deft hands secretly hiding tools from requisition, the faint hiss of steam signaling the preparation of food under surveillance. Each a lesson in observation, adaptability, and ingenuity, while time travel tip 25 crystallizes. You cannot survive this world through strength alone. Mental acuity, social understanding, and moral flexibility are just as critical. Realizing that even a single day demanded levels of coordination and intelligence almost inconceivable to a modern outsider, and the viral hook lands powerfully, you thought surviving labor, raids, or samurai patrols was sufficient. In reality, enduring the day required continuous integration of every skill. Physical endurance, mental vigilance, moral reasoning, social intelligence, tactical planning, and the ability to respond fluidly to ever-changing circumstances. Your modern assumptions about linear problem-solving, individual heroism, or moral clarity shattered by the relentless interplay of demands. And as you mentally replay moments of subtle survival, you see the extraordinary adaptability of humans, the elder signaling silently while repairing fences, the mother hiding grain while teaching her child to lie convincingly, the young man weighing compliance against survival, the child imitating vigilance, the villagers a synchronized coordination during labor and night watches, all microcosms of extraordinary skill and intelligence compressed into everyday acts. And your modern perspective is forced to recalibrate, realizing that human ingenuity and resilience are not abstract qualities but lived, practiced, and continually tested through every movement, observation, and decision in this unforgiving era, while quirky reflections continue. You thought endurance challenges were extreme. Try performing dozens of simultaneous survival tasks under constant threat. Mud sucking at your feet, muscles screaming, mental focus stretched to its limits, while a single error could result in punishment, starvation, or death. And as the village settles into uneasy nighttime routines, silent patrols, subtle signals, distributed grain, prayer rituals, and covert checks on resources, you begin to appreciate that survival here is a holistic endeavor, demanding mastery of layers of action, observation, and social coordination that are invisible to most modern eyes. And well-known historical facts ground these reflections. The Sengoku period's chaos required villagers to develop extraordinary social, mental, and physical resilience, cultivating micro-strategies and moral flexibility as core survival skills, with historians noting that such practices allowed communities to endure warfare, raids, taxation, and environmental threats with astonishing efficiency. While your mind continues to catalogue, integrate, and reflect on lessons in endurance, strategy, observation, ethics, and social intelligence, realizing that every seemingly small gesture or signal carried enormous weight and quirky details persist. The faint creak of a roof signaling movement, the soft hiss of water diverted for irrigation, a child's subtle nod indicating danger, the careful repositioning of a straw doll to convey allegiance, all teaching you that survival relied on observing, interpreting, and responding to innumerable subtle cues, while maintaining continuous vigilance, physical stamina, social grace, and ethical discernment. And time travel tip 26 resonates. You must integrate all faculties seamlessly, as failure in even a single domain jeopardizes your survival, while the viral hook hits. You thought surviving the rice fields or dodging samurai was impressive. In reality, it is the continuous integrated mastery of labor, observation, morality, social intelligence, and adaptability that defines whether a person could endure even a single day in Sengoku Japan. And as you reflect on the cumulative weight of labor, moral compromise, social navigation, and mental vigilance, your modern assumptions about comfort, safety, and agency dissolve, leaving a humbling yet profound respect for human resilience, ingenuity, and adaptability. While quirky reflections offer a final reminder, You thought modern stress was intense. Try simultaneously calculating risk, performing manual labor, negotiating loyalties, decoding subtle social signals, maintaining moral flexibility, and ensuring survival while your body aches. Your senses are on high alert, and your life literally depends on every micro-action. And as the lanterns flicker and the village settles into tense, silent night routines, your mind catalogues every lesson, strategy and observation, leaving you with a profound realization. Surviving in Sengoku, Japan was an unceasing test of the body, mind, morals, and social intelligence, where failure was often fatal, and the viral hook lands for the ultimate reflection. You wouldn't last a day in this world, and even the most prepared modern individual would be challenged to integrate endurance, vigilance, morality, and social cunning with the seamless expertise required to merely survive your journey through mud, labor, moral dilemmas, samurai encounters, raids, social negotiation, and endless observation culminating in a final, sobering understanding of the relentless complexity, danger, and brilliance of human survival in feudal Japan, leaving a lasting impression that Sengoku Japan was not a cinematic fantasy, but a multidimensional, immersive test of every human faculty, and that reflecting on these lessons, you cannot help but admire the ingenuity, resilience, and extraordinary adaptability of those who lived, labored, and survived in a world that spared no weakness, no hesitation, and no error. Concluding this penultimate section with the understanding that the ultimate takeaway is not just historical knowledge, but a visceral, almost overwhelming appreciation for the integrated skill, courage, and intelligence required to endure the relentless trials of life in feudal Japan as the lanterns flicker and the night deepens over the mud-slicked village. You finally step back, letting the weight of the day sink in. Your soaked clothes clinging, muscles aching, and mind racing from every lesson, observation, and narrow escape. And you realize that feudal Japan was never a romanticized land of cherry blossoms and honorable samurai, but a world defined by relentless labor, constant threat, rigid hierarchy, and human ingenuity under pressure, where peasants endured backbreaking work in the rice fields, navigated the unpredictable presence of samurai, balanced diplomacy and espionage within their own ranks, defended their homes with makeshift weapons, and maintained social cohesion through faith, superstition, and subtle communication. While the daimyo's expectations loomed like an invisible blade, and every misstep could be fatal, and well-known historical facts anchor this truth, Sengoku Japan was a time of unending warfare, shifting alliances and survival that required intelligence, adaptability, patience, and courage lessons that hit hard as you reflect on your journey from arrival in mud-choked streets to witnessing raids, village politics, and desperate defenses, your modern assumptions shattered by the sheer relentlessness of daily life, and quirky details still linger in your mind. A child's straw charm, a cat weaving between ankles, a tiny omamori tied to a post, symbols of resilience, hope, and practical superstition. While time travel tips resonate, observe, adapt, hide your modern self, learn from actions, and always respect the stakes of each environment, and a dry, reflective joke presses through. You thought today was rough. Imagine living it every single day without a reset button, air conditioning, or snack breaks. And as the villagers settle into tense vigilance, repairing, cooking, and guarding what little they can, you finally understand the harshest truth. Surviving a day in Sengoku Japan isn't about heroism or adventure. It's about endurance, observation, cunning, and humility, a combination of physical, social, and psychological skills that most modern people could not sustain, and the viral hook lands for the final time. If you think you could handle one day in this world, consider the constant labor, the political intrigue, the raids, the watchful samurai, and the unrelenting demands of survival, and realize that this immersive journey has only scratched the surface, leaving you with one undeniable conclusion. You wouldn't last a day in feudal Japan. And perhaps that's why we romanticize history in movies and anime, because the real world was far harsher, far grittier, and far more extraordinary than any story could fully convey. Closing your journey with respect, awe, and a sobering reflection that survival is a skill humans have honed for centuries, and that even the smallest acts of courage, observation, and adaptation can mean the difference between life and death in a world that brooks no mistakes.